Alrighty, everyone, welcome to session number 3 on day 4. If I think I have that right. I got to be honest, sometimes it's turning into a little bit of a blur, but we've got so much great content. I hope you're enjoying it. We've got a great one lined up for you here next. But first, I got to go through my normal spiel, which is participate. We get the most information. Everybody on this webinar is going to get a lot of info if you ask questions. And so to do that, all you have to do is enter it into the mobile app or the desktop app where you're watching this. Just to the right, there's a session Q&A. Type in the question there. We'll see it. Or there's also a little icon on the video screen that says Q&A. And you can enter it there and we'll see it as well. So either way, ask questions. Nothing's dumb. And we can have a real good discussion about some of the topics that our next presenter will be discussing. So on that note, I want to introduce Bill Rice. He is the founder and CEO of Kaleido and longtime industry friend. We're going to be talking about no more age leads, nurturing your leads forever. And so, Bill, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you take it from here.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I so appreciate you having us as your first run at this virtual conference. You guys have been doing an amazing job. All the sessions I've been tuning into as many as I can, and just packed and packed with information. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. And as Mike said, we're going to talk about no more age leads. And so this has been a passionate part of kind of my journey in lead generation for years. We saw kind of the opportunity in this segment of data that sort of sits in all of our CRMs, or even within the industry. There's a whole kind of niche of age lead purchasing that can be done. And then at the lead generator level, as soon as these things get over 24, 48 hours old, there's a perceived sort of different economics to them. And so there's tons and tons of opportunity in this age leads category. But a lot of times we don't build sort of the systems and processes. So I kind of want to take you through a little bit about how I think about this and how we actually gain through this segment a significant portion of revenue. So first and foremost, this is always the number one question. Yeah.
Bill, real quick, it's showing your Slack page at the moment. You want to select
Okay.
the
Stand by.
yeah, so maybe unshare and then share again, and then select the presentation.
No all right.
There you go. Cool.
That. That's all right. You can see business still going on in Slack. All right. So first and foremost, this is probably the number one question that gets asked in every session. So there's twofold here. One is a quick way to get all of the slides that I'm going to share with you. And the second portion is, you notice I'm doing it a little bit differently in that I'm actually having you send a text message, sort of text for info. And this is one of the strategies that we're actually using with age leads. And so it'll give you a little bit of a flavor of how some of this works, because you'll actually see some of my campaign that I use in a B2B way. We're going to be talking a lot about the traditional lead generation, consumer niches, mortgage, insurance, solar, but this will give you a little flavor for it. So encourage you to do this. I'll show it to you again a little bit later in the session in case you miss it, but encourage you to text age leads to 313-488-3400. Okay, so quick agenda. So first and foremost is really kind of the data-driven approach that we're going to use in bringing these leads back to life. And again, that's sort of the three categories where you can kind of put yourself in the mindset of where I generally help people create these types of campaigns. Are one, you have a CRM with a bunch of data or a book of business inside of there that hasn't really been touched or you consider dead. There's another category of people that are actually buying age leads from age lead brokers and using that specific data set. And then the third category or use case is potentially you are a lead generator, and some of your data sets and consumer inquiries, either there are legs that have not been sold, you were not able to sort of fully monetize all of the legs of that particular lead, or again, you're sitting on a population or a data set of aged leads, this is a great way to kind of energize some additional revenue. We're going to talk about how lead nurturing actually supports the buying process that's happening sort of after the initial inquiry. Also going to talk about this concept that a partner of ours, Call Action, who actually has a tool that helps us with this sort of thing, talks about a lot, and that's the one-touch lead nurturing system. So every time we get an engagement or a response, our goal, because we're generally driving towards a phone call or an appointment, is to, based on that response, we're actually going to kick them into another campaign and continue to get to that actual ideal response or engagement, which again is either an inbound call or an appointment being set up. And then I'm going to actually take you through some very specific real life lead nurturing campaigns that we're running so that you can get a sense of kind of how you can do this for yourself. So why are we here? There's a couple different reasons why you should be thinking about your aged leads. So first and foremost, generating leads is just simply hard and expensive. We all know that if you're a lead generator. Converting the actual leads, so once you've actually got the inquiry, the actual conversion process is probably as hard or perhaps harder and more expensive. So there's some additional cost that goes into actually trying to turn those internet leads into a closed deal. And then, of course, we're all curious as to whether there might be a silver bullet. And so hopefully I'll give you something as close as possible to that. So motivation, the motivation for doing all this is really data driven. There are some basic facts and laws about lead generation that are sort of baked into the system and the process as it exists today. And so it's really important to understand some of these data points. So before I kind of get into that, I want to take you through a little bit of a story, and it's how I discovered how powerful lead nurturing, and particularly aged leads, is. And this story starts back many, many years ago, where I was got a phone call from a good friend of mine who was running a startup, and this startup was he had built a great platform. It was based on sort of the free credit score space. And in that platform, they were essentially giving away a free credit score. And then they had a process by which they could then monetize those inquiries and that kind of user population. But they had gotten to a point where they were giving away a lot of free credit scores, but they weren't able to actually monetize the actual users inside of here. So we sat down for a lunch at a Thai restaurant, and I'm not a big Thai guy, so I bit into a super, super spicy chicken pad Thai, and so that was my introduction to Thai, which was his favorite, and the reason that we have this a beautiful dish of food here. We sat down, and the first thing we did was really just kind of scrub through that startup and figure out, like, what do we have to work with, because what he told me at that lunch was essentially, because they weren't able to sort of monetize that, their investors were actually going to shut the business down if they couldn't immediately turn it profitable. And so as we were kind of going through everything that was there, the thing that we came across that we actually decided to leverage was, in the process of registering for that free credit score, obviously we collected a whole bunch of email addresses, but there had been no email program. And we see this over and over again, where we, as a part of registration usually, or as a part of lead generation in general, we're collecting an email address, but oftentimes we're not doing anything productive with that to nurture it along, other than maybe kind of the initial engagement. So we're doing some outbound calling, or maybe we're doing sort of a one-off reach out and follow up to the email. And they were doing kind of the same thing. So we decided to take that large quantity, so several thousand emails, and we said, we're going to just create a nurturing campaign that will allow us to continue to talk to and provide education, and try to begin to segment all of these free credit score registrants into productive lead nurturing campaigns. So ultimately we could monetize them through a bunch of different verticals. And the power of that particular model was, everyone came in for a free credit score for all kinds of different reasons. And so there was all types of monetization sitting in there. There were people that were looking at their credit score because they were talking or thinking about insurance. They were looking at it because they were considering a home purchase or a refinance. They were doing it because they were looking into credit cards. Anyway, long story short, where I got sort of figured out the power of what we're doing now, and what I'm going to present to you is in our first email. Again, these were all essentially dead emails. They had not been emailed on a regular basis. But in that first email, we generated $25,000 in direct cash revenue. And then ultimately, that program built out over what became an email sequence that lasted and segmented that audience in multiple verticals over a 2-year period, started to generate well over $300,000 in revenue just from email each and every month. And the end of that story is that little button that you see at the top there, sign in to Bankrate, ultimately became the home of this program. So Bankrate actually acquired this company because Bankrate had a problem that a lot of lead generators do. Every time they were generating a lead, they were paying dollars each and every time. And so by putting this engine, this lead nurturing engine underneath Bankrate, they were able to stock the pond and continually build a user and a customer relationship that they could monetize over and over again and into multiple verticals. So that ultimately is sort of the power story of what we're trying to get from age leads. And again, all of that journey happened with an old email list that was sitting dormant in a database. So let's talk about some of the laws that make this sort of possible and make this an essential part of what you do in lead generation. Again, whether you're the actual insurance agent, mortgage loan officer, solar installer, or a lead generation company as well. So there's some stats that we talk about all the time, usually beating up on the salespeople, right? We generate all these leads, 44% of them don't follow up after the first call. Average salesperson takes a couple attempts at it and then just stops contacting. And that is a reality of the business because follow-up is hard, and the type of follow-up that we need to do against internet leads can be very laborious and even sort of demotivating. So we talk about this, but a couple of these things we don't often talk about. So there's a few other stats that make it essential to start doing this sort of thing. So 50% of the leads are actually qualified, but the important caveat is often they're not quite ready to buy. 70% of the buyer's journey is complete before the customer actually reach out to the sales. So there's a combination of sort of things that are happening here. One, everybody's super familiar and it's almost subconscious. You put a form on a page and people will fill the form out. We've even done some tests where we just put a form on the page and we actually don't do a lot to enhance the call to action. We just simply ask them for their information. And invariably, again, I think it's a subconscious thing. They'll just simply fill it out and get on the list. You see this in channels like Facebook. Now Google is bringing this to Google Ads, where there's kind of a form that's available, with your login. And so this is going to become more and more frequent. But the point is, they've already done all the research. They've been to several sites. And so when you get that inquiry, one, they're probably qualified, and two, they've already made a decision to buy something somewhere. It's just whether or not you have the follow-up processes to be there when they ultimately sort of turn into the actual, go into that actual buying process itself. And then, again, we see this a lot in mortgage, which is kind of my heritage, but 63% of people requesting information from the company will just simply won't be in a position or ready to purchase within the next 3 months. Another 20% is kind of sitting out there for a full 12 months. We see this a lot in home purchases. Somebody fills out a lead form and you can even ask them the question. They're probably not actually going to be in a position to do something for another 6 months. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But the big point is inquiries come in, but they are generally very far from the actual pulling the trigger and buying what you're selling. So let's just kind of, I'm gonna pull up, the other things that are kind of just in line with some of these fundamental laws is that just to kind of synopsis or kind of bring them into a synopsis here, most leads are qualified. the majority are almost ready to buy. There may be some distance there, but they've made the decision that they are going to buy. They are going to get a mortgage, or they're going to need a mortgage. They're going to get insurance, or they need insurance. They're seriously thinking about a solar installation. So by the time they fill that form out, you can be reasonably assured that they are ready to buy. They're just going to need some time and some information that gets them all the way to the actual closing of that deal. It is ultimately just a timing thing, and it's usually driven by one or more points of friction, right? So again, mortgage is kind of my heritage. So maybe they know their credit's a little dinged up. Maybe they're self-employed, not really sure how that works. Maybe they're still in the process of saving for the down payment. Maybe they're still looking for the home. So there's some points of friction, and if we can actually identify that friction and start to nurture through that, we can actually help them kind of get through it faster, or maybe even just take away that fear of the unknown, because there's some ignorance there that maybe they are in a closer position than they think. Kind of the classic 20% down. A lot of people kind of hold up because they think they need that, which is obviously not the case and hasn't been for a long time. The other thing that's really important as we kind of think about the laws that we're kind of working through is that a lead just simply never dies, right? It just moves from one level of intent to another, and sometimes it kind of goes back and forth. And then ultimately, as a result of this kind of moving back and forth in intent, oftentimes we actually stop marketing to it, and that's what actually ages a lead more than anything else. So let's talk about the buying process. So often we think of lead funnels, and I'm not going to dwell on this slide very long, but really the concept of a lead funnel where somebody kind of comes in the top and it's a very linear process that they kind of move through, or you think about your website, that they kind of go to the home page and they flip through till they find what they need, is really sort of a bad mental image of what's going on. What really is going on is with different levels of intensity, these kind of little cyclones, these little tornadoes spin up. So something catches their eye, or they think about doing something particular to your product. It spins up some intensity there. Hey, I need to renew my life insurance because I got to notice that it's getting ready, my term life insurance getting ready to expire. And then for whatever reason, they find out they got to do a medical. It's in the middle of the corona. They don't want somebody in their house. And so they sort of die off. And then something triggers them again. And so you spin up and down. Sometimes you'll see, even like this slide, they'll do multiple inquiries. So it's really more important to understand that these little sort of blips of intensity is what's going on with these leads. And really the lead inquiry is probably more than anything just an indication of there's a moment in time where that intensity or urgency has kind of popped back on the radar, but just as quickly as it's spun up, it could go away, especially with any sort of friction or overwhelm. Kind of talked about this before, but again, once you have that internet lead, the first thing that you probably should assume is they've made a decision to buy, and let's start talking to them in a slightly different way. Instead of trying to convince them to buy, let's try to move them through the friction. So this is a really good thing. I actually kind of dipped into the e-commerce world to kind of look through sort of buyer intent questions. There's tons of research in e-commerce about buyer intent. And I think it's a really good illustration of the difference between interest in something and actually kind of signing or buying something. And this is a piece of data from cart abandonment. So 70% of carts, people put stuff in their cart, and then just simply abandon it. Again, for a variety of different reasons. I don't know, on Amazon, I don't know if you're like me, I kind of use it as a wish list. So I put a bunch of stuff in there. Plus they've almost incented it because they'll tell me the price changes if I put something in there. So anyway, on mobile, it jumps all the way to 80%. And so again, sort of building the case for nurturing these aged leads, the people who actually go after that cart abandonment. So if you're working internet leads, the people who actually go after the internet lead after that initial sort of high intensity moment when they actually submit the inquiry get 45% open rates because they know who you are. They've reached out to you. And so there is some familiarity. They definitely have some interest because they've raised their hand. And remember, again, 70% of the buying decisions already been made. So you get an incredible open rate on your emails. You get an incredible click-through rate. I mean, most of your email campaigns are not performing like this, but after an initial show of intent, a form fill or a phone call, an inbound phone call, these are the kinds of response rates that we can get. 5% opens, 21% click-through rate, and then here's the huge opportunity. 18% of those convert into sales. So if you're not actually creating this follow-up process, which of course needs to be automated. I'm going to show you that here in a second. But you're leaving 18% of sales that were in those leads on the table. So let's get some of those sales. So I'm going to talk through very specifically. And again, you guys feel free to jump in with questions. At this point, we're going to get into kind of some specifics of how we set these campaigns up. So if you guys want to get into details of the types of campaign, maybe some of the messaging that we send out, this is definitely the time to do it. Okay, so first and foremost, it's important to know that your sales team is dying a little bit, not because of phone calls, right? So no salesperson burns out or doesn't hit their quota because they're talking to too many people and having too many sales conversations. They're getting burned out. They're missing their sales quota because they just simply cannot make the number of follow-ups that are necessary to actually get the response rate to get these folks on the phone that are the result of these internet leads. So what kills salespeople? Data entry, repetitive activities, and then of course the negative feedback. And we're going to talk about this a little bit when we talk about text messaging. The negative feedback that they're getting all along this journey, if we're not automating this and they're just doing this one at a time, that can be excruciating because they're going to see all of those sort of very directly, and they're not going to have enough volume to actually see kind of the positive aspect of all that activity. So again, it gets back to what percentage of these are sort of in an age state or in a state that needs this automated follow-up. So only 3% of that market are actively buying, 56% of the market's not ready, and then of course 40% of the market is just getting ready to begin. So if you're just going out there, you're not even doing internet leads, you're just kind of going out into the market, this even gets more frustrating. So the companies who actually institute lead nurturing, the type of things that we're going to be talking about, is 50% more sales and at a cost of 33% less. And this just makes sense. You're buying all of those internet leads, or you're generating all those with marketing dollars. If you're not doing this follow-up, there is, again, we showed you all kinds of statistics about how much is being left on the table. If you just simply put these nurturing programs in place, you're going to lift your sales, your overall revenue sales goal 50%, and then of course reduce the cost, because that ROI is just going to jump. And then most importantly, you're going to preserve your sales team, right? Because no human can endure the drudgery of the type of follow-up. And I'm actually going to show you a campaign over just 3 days, the amount of follow-ups that we were able to do and to generate the engagement rate that we're hoping for. But again, no human could do that. And even if they did, you would be applying really expensive resources to a pretty mundane task. The other secret to this is the one-step nurturing. Like I told you, once we get a response or an engagement, we want to just have one click to send them into sort of the next appropriate segment campaign. Here's ultimately what we're trying to get to. So if you kind of look at this, this is the stage at which the inquiry comes in. There's all kinds of this, just pounding the phones, pounding the email, this really kind of low skill. And we've seen all this data. You got to make 6 to 10 attempts. You got to respond, within seconds. All of that is stuff that just murders your sales force. When we get into the conversation part, this is what we want our folks doing, right? And there's conversation, and this is where the one click, maybe there's a conversation, and then there's some follow-up. A lot of times follow-up kind of gets lost and slow in here. And again, you have to kind of go back into this phase. So this is a really good cycle to understand. Again, low skill, lots of outbound, repetitive follow-up. Then we're going to nurture through, and we're going to bring back to the inquiry. So this is kind of a cycle that we go through multiple times. And really, all we want our sales team to do is this part right here, have conversations. And so everything that we're doing in these other blocks, generally, we can automate. And this allows, again, our high value, high skill, expensive resources are just focusing on this core here. Okay, false contacts. We're going to talk about that. That's a great question. How many of these are kind of not real? So one of the things that's really nice about automation is there's so many tools as you get those inbound leads, or you're scrubbing some of your old leads. There's some great tools that will go through and validate and potentially even append new information. And so whenever we start these campaigns and we use these tools, we're always going through a process of verifying, and we can talk specifically about some vendors if that's necessary, but there are vendors that allow you to verify emails. There are vendors that allow you to append new and updated contact information, and there are ways to validate phone numbers, and some of these with reverse lookups and those sorts of things, some of these are done in some of the tools that I'm going to show you. So that's really important. That'll suss out a lot of that activity. Okay. Before I get into the tools and techniques, I always give this disclaimer. I am not your legal counsel. I'm not your compliance officer. I don't know your particular unique business circumstance. I don't know where you're getting your leads from. So all of those are kind of unknowns to me. So all I'm doing in this presentation is I'm going to show you some tools and some techniques and some technology that's available on the market. How you choose to implement and execute is something that has to be kind of done as an internal conversation. So find that legal counsel, find your general counsel, find your compliance officer, and kind of work through all those issues. I'm just trying to expose you to kind of what's available out there and could be leveraged and has been. Okay, so now we're going to go into the really practical part of this whole process. And so this is probably where you're going to generate a lot of questions. So let those kind of questions flow as they come up. So the first thing I do, again, let's think about the three types of data sets that I could be working with. The first data set would be again, your own book of business, your own CRM. All of us have, several hundred, maybe several thousand leads and data sort of sitting in that contact database that we probably haven't contacted. We've assumed or even statused them as dead, and we don't do anything with them, but they're in there. And so they're available to us to do some campaigning if we do it in a good way. So that's one use case. Another use case is actually, and this is ideally how you want to kind of make sure that you never have aged leads. All of your inbound internet leads, or wherever you're originating your internet leads from your website, or you're buying them directly from a lead generator, you want to insert them into this process right at the beginning, and then you want to continue to work and nurture them forever, right? Until they opt out or until they unsubscribe. Let them make that decision. Do everything you can along the way to give them value so that doesn't happen. Again, a lot of these programs that we're running, they're 2 years long, and people are happy to stay in them because we're constantly introducing values, or valuable content, education. Don't forget offers. Offers are super important. People are generally made an inquiry because they're looking to buy something, and that's what they expect from you. So don't ever be shy about offering them the product they came in for and potentially other sort of complementary products. And then the third category, again, use case, is you're an actual lead generator. You're generating these leads all the time. Don't let them to go cold while you're selling them out. Make sure that they're still staying warm and they're still familiar with your brand so that you can continue to monetize that population, right? So everybody's moved to this. LendingTree kind of has their own sort of environment. Bankrate, I showed you kind of what they did and how they did it. But there's no reason that as a lead generator, you shouldn't continue to nurture the leads that you're generating with your marketing dollars so that you can continue to monetize them. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we want to trigger remarketing, right? We want to make them as familiar as possible. So however they happen to be coming into you, or even if you're taking them out of a dead database, we want to do something that will trigger remarketing. And what the goal of this step in the process, in this phase, and this is the first thing I do after the verification and validation step, right? Making sure that the emails are accurate for this particular step, is generally I will stick them into Facebook and build custom and lookalike audiences from them, because I want to take those. This is a nice thing about the consumer. It doesn't work as well for the B2B, but in the consumer marketplace, you can take all that data. A large percentage of them are personal emails, and they will immediately sort of hook up into the Facebook algorithm. And so I want to, before I even do any sort of outreach, particularly if it's aged data or leads, But even, kind of as I'm doing the internet marketing, it's kind of timing's slightly different. But if this is dead list or age leads that I'm buying, before I make one single contact with them, I'm going to get them into Facebook, use the custom audiences, and I'm going to start introducing them to my brand. I'm going to create awareness. I'm going to start warming that list up with my content. I'm going to get that Facebook pixel engaged. I'm going to hopefully also get my Google remarketing engaged. And I'm simply running Facebook ads. Video is preferable. I'm running those ads and getting them warmed up and engaged with my brand on Facebook. I'm hopefully also driving them to my website here. And then hopefully I'm actually getting an additional inquiry, right? They might download something. They might actually fill out another lead form. But through these two processes, I want to capture them with that pixel, and I want to start the remarketing process. Once I have that going, I can do display, I can do Facebook, I can do all of my Google ads. I can run them out to some additional ad platforms as well. But I want to create some brand familiarity before I start my outreach. Now, if these are inbound internet leads, I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm not going to delay my outreach, obviously, but I'm going to go ahead and put this to work for me, because I know even though I've got that inquiry, I've probably got a couple months before that thing's going to land. And so I'm going to go ahead and continue to do this. So that's my first step. Get that remarketing going. Here's a couple of examples. I'll give you just a real quick Facebook sort of hints if you've never done this before. A lot of people don't. When they're working internet leads, they don't even think about doing any sort of remarketing or Facebook campaigns, and it's a huge lift if you put this in. So here's the quick kind of 5-second tutorial. You want to be relevant. You want to create some sort of pattern interrupt. That's why I like the videos, because they kind of autoplay. There's no sound, but it kind of gets something moving through here. I chose a picture like this because it's actually atypical. Normally sort of your real estate and your mortgage Facebook ads usually have a big, beautiful McMansion, really close up, nicely framed. And this is just kind of this odd backyard. And in this particular campaign, we're kind of playing to the coronavirus and house being a sanctuary, some open space, everybody's a little stir crazy. So again, that's kind of why we went with this approach. Again, creating a little bit of that pattern interrupt. Want to create some curiosity. And then all of this is for naught unless you're testing, because you will find out all kinds of different things as you run these ads, what works, what doesn't work. Here's a go at sort of an insurance approach. A couple things here that highlight some additional things. Finding interesting perspectives. Again, this is kind of running through a time when people kind of, I don't know if you long for this, but we're not sitting in traffic. We're not doing the commute anymore. And so this almost feels a little weird. So again, creating that pattern interrupt. The emojis, these definitely work. Create some curiosity. Bullet points. In any sort of direct response copywriting, bullet points always win. And so we play with those. This also has kind of an expansion situation where there's kind of some dots and little curiosity face to just kind of get them to open that and go a little bit deeper into the ad. Again, testing is important. Here's a solar approach. This kind of highlights where we try, even with our remarketing with the Facebook, is a great way to work through some of that initial friction point. So in the solar industry, we all know kind of the cost of it is always a question or curiosity or maybe even an ignorance part of the equation. And so we tried to sort of hit hard friction point and sort of address it on. It's like, hey, you should do the math. And so we kind of went with that approach here. This Facebook is a great way to sort of hit and move through points of confusion or points of friction or misunderstanding in the market. Show how simple it is. This one in particular works really nicely. We're actually going to kind of show them how we use this tool to kind of figure out the panels and how it goes onto the house. And again, this is going to work through this. And you're going to actually see as I go through the video and the tool, how simple the process is to kind of get to a place where you're ready to install. Again, testing is important. Video, no sound. I kind of highlighted this because most of you who have run any sort of Facebook knows that kind of putting words on the images is a challenging part of the process. Video is a great way to kind of get around that. You can tell a full story with the sound off by using kind of animation and visual graphics and words on that video. So a great way to do that. Okay. So then once we've kind of started to warm it up, or if we've got inbound, we want to actually, as much as possible, simulate an actual salesperson engaging this. But we don't want to get the salesperson engaged until such time that we have someone that's interested and ready to either have a phone conversation or schedule an appointment. So particularly with the age leads category, even more so than the internet leads, if you work internet leads, you know, again, you're pounding the phones, there's a low percentage sort of response and answer rate. Once you go into that age data, or your population has aged inside of your CRM, again, one of those three use cases, that response rate is going to be even lower if all you're doing is just outbound phone calls. And so many people do that. They'll buy age leads and they'll just simply dial through the spreadsheet. Or they'll go into their CRM because it's slow or they're missing their quota. They'll go dip into the old leads in their CRM and they'll just start pounding the phones through that. And again, super frustrating. Great way to burn yourself out. Instead, we want to actually build some automation and some simulation of that process. And the more that we can make it just like a good quality, ideal, picture perfect, slide perfect follow-up, which we can build with these kind of tools, that's what we're trying to do. And so I'm going to actually show you one of these and give you the opportunity to download my template here. But what we're actually trying to automate here, and the techniques that we're going to use, is as soon as we start working that lead, again, whether it's a new lead or somebody that we pulled out of our age data set in our CRM, we're going to start with all of these channels at once, right? We're going to drop a ringless voicemail, because again, we know those outbound calls are going to all end up in a voicemail anyway. So if again, back and re-disclaim, right? As long as this is permissible in your organization, the ringless voicemail is the most efficient, because you're actually dropping a voicemail from yourself. It's relevant, it's appropriate, and you're dropping it without interrupting them and without kind of going through the power dial or process of kind of getting to the point of the voicemail. We're going to then quickly follow that up with a text message, letting them know that, hey, this is me. I'm the one who's kind of left the voicemail, and tell them what you're trying to accomplish and how you're just trying to check in on them. And then we're also somewhere along the line in the voicemail or in the series of maybe a couple of initial text messages, we're going to foreshadow that we're going to go ahead and send you an email as well with your contact information. So that actually gets them looking for the email, which gives you a better open rate, better response rate, and potentially sort of whitelisting that email process. So let me jump out of the slides real quick, and I'll kind of show you just real quickly, because we don't have a ton of time to go through this. This is how I build these out. This is the exact template that I'm using. And I go through a series of phases. So with this, again, this is all automation. There's nobody pounding the phones here. With automation, as soon as I start working the lead, I'm going to drop a voicemail. It's going to look like this. Real simple, real cordial, should feel like you're going to record this so that you can drop it, hopefully. And it's going to be something like, hello, this is Bill from Kaleido, reaching out to follow up on the online request you made a couple months ago. Again, transparent with, hey, we haven't talked. It's been a couple months, but I wanted to just check in on you. We didn't connect then, so I want to check in on you. Did you get your mortgage? Did you actually get your solar panels installed? Whatever that is, again, show them that you're just trying to be helpful. You're just following up on the lead that came in a couple months ago that for whatever reason you guys didn't connect. And then just tell them, call or text, happy to help, right? There's no sales pitch, there's no pressure here. It's just simply, this is who I am, just checking in on you to see if you got the product that you asked about. Then this is where the simulation comes into kind of being a real person. All right, a few seconds after you leave that voicemail, you're going to turn to your phone, theoretically, and you're going to type in a real quick text message just to reinforce that voicemail. And again, you do this with your friends sometimes, right? You might leave a voicemail. Probably people don't do any of that as much anymore, but a lot of times you would leave a voicemail and then you text them, hey, I left your voicemail, right? And so we're kind of simulating the same thing. Hi, about 20 minutes ago, just to check in. Again, reinforcing that, hey, just checking on you. And then we use this double tap technique where we're again simulating. So just very few seconds later, right? I'm going to, just like you might do, I'm going to break up that text. I'm going to write a little bit, and then I'm going to take a second, and then I'm going to write the rest. Oh, I had a second thought. And so this is, hey, can I call you in 20 minutes? And then give it a couple seconds and like, oh, they didn't respond. Oh, maybe I could try again in 45 minutes, right? And so that's kind of a technique, again, to look like a real person. And then voicemail, again. 4 hours later, end of the day is kind of what you're simulating. I'm going to check in on you one more time, right? And this time it's going to be super simple. Hey, this is Bill. Just give it a call or text in a few minutes. All right. So we've gone through that phase. We're going to continue through. Again, this is a campaign, right? And this campaign is going to run until we get some sort of engagement response, and then it's going to pause. And then we as salespeople are going to take over that interaction. And we're going to follow up if there's real action to be had, or if it's a, hey, who are you? Then I'm going to have, again, scripted, I'm going to have a one-touch. If they come back, and which is a pretty common first response is, hey, who is this again? Even though you told them, and then you just have a real friendly, oh, this is Bill. I'm from so-and-so mortgage company. Just checking in on you. Did you get your mortgage? And again, picking that up. If they say, oh, no, I'm good, we're not going to actually buy for another 3 months, then what do? You click on the follow-up in 3 months campaign, and then that's going to do something different. Again, you can build these campaigns. That's where we're kind of doing one touch. So we're essentially dispositioning every single one of those, and we've built out those objection campaigns. Okay, I'm not going to dwell too long in here because I do want to open up for any questions that we have. But then I'm going to continue a day later. Again, voicemail. This is really powerful. Here is a voicemail that says, hey, I'm going to shoot you an email. It's just going to have all my contact information. And then you do just that, right? 5 minutes later, you schedule it, that email goes out, and all it says is, hey, here's all my contact information. Just hold on to this. Like if you need me later, or you got a friend, gets referrals too. Then we're going to go through a nurturing phase. And again, we're using text messaging just because of the engagement rate that's here. But now I'm going to try to push them. If you have a website, I'm going to stop hassling them to get on the phone, and I'm going to start introducing them to how helpful we can be, or some contact or some content on my website that potentially pushes them through some of those friction points. So maybe I'm introducing them to a video I have, or I'm going to talk to them about credit. I'm going to talk to them about saving for a down payment, or I'm going to talk to them about a particular program. Again, we're trying to simulate a real person. Here's something of interest. In this case, I like to push them to a video, and then I follow up just a couple hours later. Hey, I haven't heard from you. I gave them time to watch the video. I'm thinking about you. Hey, what did you think of the video? And then a couple days later, we're going to do the same thing again. And then again, I want to kind of move them into a different nurture cycle. So this is kind of losing the battle. I'm not getting any response. I don't want to leave them alone forever, but I'm going to take them through sort of the goodbye letter or process. And again, these are a series of voicemails and text messages over several days, couple weeks, and then I'm going to say goodbye to them, and then I'm going to put them into my long-term nurture campaign, which is predominantly email and a very occasional voicemail drop. And then again, you can pop in there with some text messages as well. So let me get back over here. And so there's a lot in there. Okay, yeah, good. What's the recommendation on intervals between voicemail, text, and email for best response? So if you're thinking about those, you kind of saw how I built out that, that script. You really want to kind of, this technique is so responsive, you don't have to pound on them like you do phone calls and emails. You can be very sort of cordial and patient when you're using these kinds of techniques because there's a couple of advantages. Voicemails, because the ringless voicemail drops, they're actually going to go in there, they're going to see the voicemail. A lot of them are, turn them into text. So I would do that, every few days. Again, same call cadence that you're using on your phone, just replace it with the tool so that you don't have to actually make those physical phone calls, or you don't have to hit that dialer, which is kind of mind-numbing process. The text messaging, you can be a little bit more frequent. The best way to kind of do text messaging is to, again, kind of use that double tap technique so that it feels like you're really leaving them a text message. And then just do that, every few days. The cadence is going to quickly slow down, right? When you first warm it up, you're going to kind of do that cadence at a pretty high rate. And then you're going to kind of really back it down, right? And again, it's just going to become an occasional check-in, but you're going to find every time you do that check-in, again, text message, there's no filter. They're not pushing them off to the promotions tab. You don't have any of those problems with text messaging. So So text messaging is going to be super responsive. They're going to be able to see everything you do. So unlike email, you can't pound on these folks. You have to do it much like you would a friend that you're kind of trying to check in on. They're kind of like, thinking about something else and not thinking about you. And so don't be like the kind of the jolted boyfriend or the stalkerish girlfriend, right? Just send them occasionally, just tell them you're thinking of them and you're checking in and you're there for questions. So again, infrequent, because again, it's going to be highly responsive and engaged. You're going to get so much more production out of it with a lot less, even though you're using automation, with a lot less frequency. Email, you can still pile up the frequency on email, because email has all the problems that email has now. They're getting super effective. It kind of put them in promotions. But again, so you can do some frequency there. But again, everything on email, you're kind of trying, and that's a whole nother kind of a webinar or talk. But for the most part, voice, you're going to do at the frequency that you normally do outbound calls. You might even be able to back it off. And then text messaging, fairly frequent at the beginning, just so that you show that you're being responsive to them and you're really trying to get them set up on an appointment, and then really back it off and then just do it occasionally, because you're going to get into their text inbox, right? And they're going to be able to see everything you do. So do that very judiciously. And then email, you can still be super frequent. So hopefully that helps. Okay. So what you just looked at, if you want to look at that in detail, just text REVIVE to 313-488-3400, and you're going to get directly into that Google Doc. Both the slides and the Google Docs, I've opened up comments in there, so you can ask more questions as you get these things through. Once you kind of go into this, we'll also be able to text back and forth if you have additional questions. Okay, so again, really important, and that I wasn't able to kind of demonstrate as well, because I'm not going to kind of get in or sell the tool specifically, but the goal here is you're no longer chasing leads. All of you today have a sales process that is built to chase leads, and this does two things. I've actually run into this as we've worked with more clients, is we are so conditioned in all of these verticals to be doing outbound chasing of leads that we've actually, not only are we burning our sales teams out, but we're actually creating some bad habits. So as long as we hit the quota, this is such a sort of an onerous process that we're exhausted by the time we hit our quotas. So we're never going to exceed our quotas, right? We just go right up. We do all the effort that we can until we get to that quota, and then we relax because we just have to, right? And so that's a condition that's there. It's also created a condition. I had a client actually say this. We were actually creating appointments with this process, and they're like, oh, we don't want to create appointments because our folks always miss the appointments. We just want them to go outbound and get them on the phone and kind of hit as catch can or take the inbound calls or whatever. And so who passes up a schedule, right? So you also create this behavior whereby your salespeople are overwhelmed by actually a booked calendar. Which again is what this process kind of does. And so there's some unwinding to be effective with this. Often we'll turn on these type of campaigns and we'll be asked to turn them off because the salespeople are just overwhelmed with so much engagement. Every interaction triggers a campaign, so you really need to think about all those objections, all those next steps, and be able to trigger those. So here's an example of a couple of campaigns that we always create, because again, as soon as we get this, we want to click the button, send them into that other campaign. I'm all good. We're not going to let them off. The number one response to I'm all good, especially if you're on the phone, is, okay, I'll take you off my list, right? Because we're automatically in this defensive posture. No, if you say I'm all good, that's great to hear. Excellent. I'm going to follow up with you in a few months just to check to see if you have any other needs. I'm going to click that button, and they're going to go into a 3-month follow-up campaign, and I'm going to have built that out. Call me in a couple of weeks, right? Just kind of the push off. Get out of here. I'm busy. I've got things going on in the background. Got distractions in my house. Push it off for a couple of weeks. That's fine. I'm not going to worry about it. That's great. I'm going to click that campaign. I'm going to follow up in a month, right? Send me some info, right? Or send me your contact information. That's fine. I'm going to put them in my researching campaign. Again, I'm going to send them out my contact information. I'm going to send them out some cool videos, but I don't have to touch them or think about them again. They're off on their own campaign. They're out of my queue. Give me a call this evening. How many times do we miss this, right? Missed sales call campaign, right? This is great also for people that actually have an appointment. They don't show up. This happens. Let's not think about them. Let's not wrestle over it. Let's not feel bad about ourselves or what happened or somehow they hate us. We just simply click over into our missed call follow up, and we put them into that campaign. All right, and then ultimately email. Again, this is once we go into that long term, we can go for like, we can go for 2 years on this, and this is really the long term nurturing. And this is more traditional. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here. We're going to make it content driven. We're going to have evergreen themes, and then of course we're trying to run to capturing new intent, right? A new form fill out, new inbound call. Again, some important things, goes to infinity. We're educating through this process. Don't forget to sell. Don't forget to give out offers. Ultimately, we're going back to the sales cyclone, and this is what it looks like. We're going to start up here with Facebook ads. We're going to go all the way down through here. We're going to use all these things together to create massive engagement. So does it work? So this is what we were doing before, and we were just doing email, and we were being pretty successful, right? 25% open rate, 3% click-through rate, 1% reply or engagement rate. Moving to voicemail, text, email together. This is just an example. We'll put in 150 leads. Traditionally, put in a small number of leads. This was only running for 3 days at the point that I took these screenshots. We got 43 replies. 24 of them were inbound calls. We had a 28.7% engagement rate, and you can see that's the script right there that we're running. What other, and again, this is really important, number 2. This was how many interactions or follow-ups that were required to get to that 43 contacts. So this is what your salespeople have to do, 621 actions in order to get 43. We did it all with automation. All right, Mike, I'll turn it back to you if there's any questions. Hopefully we got a few along the way that we answered, but. Oh, I think you're muted, Mike, or at least I'm not hearing you.
Thank you. I was muted. You think I would have learned this by now? I think I went through an information wind tunnel. That was awesome. And I am going to make a promise to those that are watching this live that I'm going to prioritize this one recording and getting it up on the app so people can watch it again, because there's so much great information in what you just shared. And thank you for providing. It was awesome. I mean, really, really, really great. And they can obviously reach out to you with the information that's up on the screen right now. You can also, there are a couple questions that we didn't address. Bill, you can actually go into the app and address those. And obviously those of you that ask those questions, you can reach out to Bill directly through the app as well, or his email right up there. But that was really, really great, Bill. I appreciate the information. I feel like we should continue this conversation. You can do it again, just to be able to dive into some of this stuff, because I'm thinking to myself from my own business perspective with the conference, I'm like, man, there's all these things I can be doing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be mortgage related, but it's really applicable to anything. And so thank you so much. I appreciate you being a part of this. For those that, like I said, are interested in contacting Bill, please do so immediately. And then I think we'll be in good shape. So thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me be a part of this. There's so much great information in this conference. So just a pleasure to be a part of it.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.